And welcome back to Inside the Ropes. We had this man on our show back in November of 2012. He is back. He is one of the biggest stars of all time in pro wrestling, and he's got a new show on CMT as well. He is the one and only Stone Cold Steve Austin. Steve, welcome back.
Hey, man, appreciate you having me.
And yeah, so we're obviously going to talk about your new show, Steve Austin's Broken Skull Challenge. But before we do that, since we last had you on, you started your own podcast, The Steve Austin Show, and it's been so popular now you do it twice a week, and it's been going for over a year now. And I just kind of wondered, you know, as someone that does a podcast myself, not anywhere near to the success level of yours, but what's the kind of biggest challenge for you putting that together even now?
You know, that's a real good question. I appreciate you asking that. Steve Austin Show, I do a family-friendly version on Tuesday, an explicit version on Thursday, and they drop on iTunes and PodcastOne.com, and you download them for free. But you know, I was talking to Christopher Daniels. He came over to the house yesterday, and he was asking me how I book my guests and how do I maintain the schedule. And just if I was just doing 2 podcasts a week and nothing else, it would be very easy. But I got a lot of other things going on, and so I kind of just treat the podcast like I do everything in my life. I live very spontaneously, and all of a sudden I'll just call someone up out of the blue and say, hey, man, you want to do my show? Such as Vince Russo. The day before I talk to him, that's when I set up that interview. So it's always kind of a work in progress, and I try to do the best job I can, but at the end of the day, when you listen to people like yourself who are in radio and just so good at what they do, I just listen to perfection, just like with Adam Carolla, because he's so good. But me, mine's just kind of it's me doing my thing. I don't have to be a professional, a quote-unquote professional, and all I'm trying to do is entertain people for about an hour each time we do a show, whether they're going to or from work. And it's almost not to put myself on a level with Jerry Seinfeld, but it's not about anything that's going to save your life. It's just entertainment. So I just wing it and try to do the best I can to try to entertain people, and that's about it.
It's funny, you know, we had your good friend JR on the show not too long ago promoting one of his one-man shows, and I remember saying to him something that I've found when I listen to your show and his show is that because some of the guys that you have on there, like maybe a Shawn Michaels or even a Vince Russo, because you know these guys, there's a comfort level that they're able to have with you. You know, they can speak freely and know that you're not going to, you know, use their words against them or anything like that. That creates a nice kind of atmosphere to listen to, I think.
Well, you know, man, you know, I've been down the road a few times, and I got things that, you know, I'd rather not talk about. I mean, man, I never want to put any guys on the spot. And anytime someone comes on my show, man, I want to highlight the positives and the good stuff that they've done. And just recently I talked to P.J. Polacco, who wrestles Aldo Montoya and Just Incredible, and he talked about, you know, kicking heroin. So sometimes there's stories like that. But, hey, man, I just want to have conversation. I don't want to be the journalist which asks the tough questions and puts them on the spot. So at the end of the day, it's 2 guys talking shop about wrestling, about some things that went on in our lives, and I think people can appreciate that. And so far, you know, it's been very successful, and I appreciate anybody that listens to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you brought up Vince Russo, because I just wanted to quickly ask you, we've had him on the show as well before, and he's a very polarizing personality a lot of the time, but you worked with him in the Attitude Era. You were right there with him. And I just wondered, from your perspective, he gets a lot of criticism. Do you think that in terms of his contribution to the Attitude Era, that he is underappreciated? And how much of a contribution do you think he had from being someone that was there with him?
I think he had a great contribution to the Attitude Era. And when I was talking to him, I did part 1 with him last Tuesday. Part 2 comes up this Tuesday, and there's some pretty heavy stuff on there I think you'll be able to appreciate. But I think he didn't do so well in WCW. He didn't do so well in TNA. I think that's where the criticism comes from. I always thought Vince Russo was at his best presenting his ideas to a guy like Vince McMahon, who was very grounded with the basics, fundamentals, and psychology of professional wrestling, and so that Vince Russo could take him out of his box a little bit, but Vince McMahon could keep Russo's ideas grounded enough so that they all made sense. And I say that with all due respect to Vince Russo. He's going to come back on a podcast, and we're going to talk about his WCW and his TNA days at another time. But no doubt about it, he left an indelible mark on the Attitude Era, and I had a blast working with the guy. And I believe, you know, when he speaks from the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the last few years you've had a lot of different projects on, and you've worked a lot with CMT on Redneck Island, things like that. But you made a sort of return to the WWE at WrestleMania 30, and I thought the interesting thing about that was the last time you had appeared for WWE was 3 years before at WrestleMania in Atlanta. And I just wondered, when you were there at WrestleMania 30, did you notice a difference, a big difference from the last time you were there at WrestleMania? Because it seems like there has been a real movement to look towards the future with guys like Bray Wyatt and Cesaro and The Shield, compared to maybe the last time you were there, when there was maybe a bit more of a reliance on established names.
Well, I think anytime you can use some names from the past, that's good. But by all means, I mean, certainly they're going down the road and looking to the new generation. Your Wyatt, Cesaro's, I mean, the Shield, all those guys. That's where the future lies. But you always want to, pay homage to the past and the people that paved the way, but not lean on those people for drawing a house. You're leaning on your crop, your superstars on hand right now to draw the gates, and that's what you need to focus your time and your money developing.
And you've obviously focused a lot of your time, like I said, with CMT doing Redneck Island before, and now Steve Austin's Broken Skull Challenge, brand new show, is going to debut on July 6th. So instead of me trying to tell people what it's about, for people who are listening to this, what is the show about and what can they expect from it on July 6th?
Well, I came up with the idea for the Broken Skull Challenge hosting Redneck Island. That's a competition show, but you're voted off the island. I come from an athletic background. I don't consider myself an actor. I consider myself an athlete. And so I love hardcore competition. So it was my idea to come up with another type of competition show where I could host it and bring the cream of the crop athletes from the United States to my ranch and put them through 3 rounds of competition. Each week I bring 8 people to the ranch, 3 rounds of competition. If you win, you stick around. If you lose, you go home. At the end of the day, there's one person left standing. That person will take on the next day my personal obstacle course, which I designed with another guy who comes from the world of CrossFit, and we call this course the Skull Buster. It is designed to whip a man's ass. It will pick apart body part by body part and then get into your mind and make you doubt yourself. And that's what it's about. If you can beat my Skull Buster after 3 rounds of competition, sending other people home, I will give you $10,000. And I drew from the world of CrossFit, Tough Mudders, Spartan Racers, MMA, and a couple of pro wrestlers. So everybody that came to my ranch was in premier physical conditioning, also from the world of football, and they also had to have a strong mindset and a hell of a lot of heart to beat my course.
And, at the moment in pro wrestling, Daniel Bryan obviously went through a lot with his neck injury, and you know all about that too well because you had the really serious neck injury in 1997 at the SummerSlam pay-per-view. But I thought it was really interesting, the parallels of, Daniel Bryan's had his neck injury and he's kind of been kept away from television so far, but when you had your injury in 1997, you were on TV and you were doing the story where it all led up to you stunning Vince McMahon in Madison Square Garden. And I just wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that time period and how important it was at that point for you to stay on television, to continue that hot run that you'd been on up until that point.
Well, it was all because of, the diagnosis. When I got dropped on my head, I bruised my spinal cord and had some stenosis. So I didn't need the surgery right away. I just needed to rest my neck. After I got back in the ring, then I had some bone spurs growing against my spinal cord, so I had to have them removed, and that was where the danger was. So an entirely different situation than Daniel Bryan. He had a minimally invasive surgery ASAP, I guess, after the injury or whatever he did happened. So, yeah, I was able to maintain some television presence, continue on with the storylines, and then finally when I started getting back in the ring, they started putting me in tags and 6-mans just to keep me in front of the crowds, also to help keep drawing the houses, but to protect me. But, once I started getting hot, and to be able to overcome that physical, thing that happened to me, it only made people buy into Stone Cold Steve Austin more. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Daniel Bryan. Will he have to change his work style? And what will the crowd do when he comes back? And I hope that they accept him with open arms, and they've got some great stories for a great storyline or an angle to get him, back to where he was, or even at a level higher if that's possible.